Welcome to Austin Tech Connect, the official podcast of the Austin Technology Council. Presented to you by NetSpend. Homegrown in Austin, NetSpend has been a leading provider of consumer and business payment solutions for almost 25 years. From prepaid cards to mobile bank accounts to money movement services, NetSpend connects people, brands, and payment products to deliver innovative financial solutions.
Hey there, and welcome to another episode of Austin Tech Connect. This is the official podcast of the Austin Technology Council. And this podcast is all about Austin's tech ecosystem and what's going on now and what we see into the future. So every single week, I try to engage local leaders to hear their stories of success and to get their advice on how we can all thrive. My name is Tom Singer, and I've been with the Austin Technology Council for a little over a year, and we're looking to reinvent ATC. So we're looking to the grassroots visionary leaders of Austin to come lend their voice as we're trying to look to the future, the next 10 years, 20 years, etc. So if you're listening to this and we don't know you, make sure that you reach out to the Austin Technology Council. So today, we're going to talk about hiring and the state of jobs in Austin and beyond when it comes to technology companies. And we are joined by Wade Allen. Wade is a new board member of the Austin Technology Council, and he's been super active with ATC going back to the days when it was the Austin Software Council. He's been around Austin a long, long time. He's been in the recruiting business for almost 30 years, and he's a problem solver. He looked at the world of executive recruiting and said, how can we shake this up? How can we have a different approach? And so what he does is he works with this 3D analysis to help companies decide what it is they really need. Because sometimes they think they need one thing, but really it's something else. And his whole focus over the last 28 plus years has been hiring for culture and chemistry, because that's really what matters in the long run. So Wade, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thanks, Tom. I appreciate you having me on here, and I appreciate all you've done for the Austin Technology Council over the last year here. You've been a great asset to the ATC.
Well, thank you. So today we want to talk about jobs and the state of jobs. But first, can we hear a little bit about your background? How did you get started in the business world, and then what led you to executive recruiting?
Well, if you go back to quote unquote get in the business world, it actually goes back further than that, because all my degrees, original degrees, were all bachelors and masters in things like EE and computer science and math science, and started in development labs at IBM, but quickly transitioned to the business side of the equation because I wanted to help to set the direction for the future for companies, and that's kind of the knack that I had, and that's kind of what put me there on the path to the business world.
So as we look at the executive search world, what led you into that?
Well, that was actually interesting as well, because I had hired, ran companies, startup divisions, et cetera, for companies, and hired literally hundreds of people in that process. And over a couple of years, people were saying, you ought to be a recruiter. And I was saying, there's no way in the world I'll ever be a recruiter. And finally, one of the two recruiters that I had, higher respect for, made that comment, and I said, okay, what's going on here? And he wanted me to start up a division for him, or office in Austin, but I turned him down. But over the next 8 or 9 months, it just I did a lot of research and realized, okay, let's set a different process that solves some of the problems that I saw in my career happening. And talked to a bunch of CEOs, execs across the country, and they said, if you can do it, go do it. And within 90 days, I already had 3 people working for me full time, and we were named one of the top boutiques within 6 years.
Nice. So what is special about Cendea?
Well, Cendea is really coming from the mindset of the CEO. It's, we're very consultative. All the partners, didn't come out of HR and search. All the partners have been executives in multiple industries, and we literally can pull our chair behind you and help solve the problems that we've been through ourselves before. And so, we do that. And again, kind of what you talked about earlier, we're trying to help a company through that 3D analysis understand what they really need versus what sometimes they think they need. And, sometimes that can be really game changing for them because they're actually getting an asset. And then that 3D analysis also helps him to make sure that all of the key staff around him are all looking for the same thing, because the only way to maximize ROI is for everybody to be on the same page.
We talked about that idea of hiring for culture and chemistry. Why is that so important?
Well, if you're working for a startup and you're a 5-person startup and you're the CTO or VP of sales or whatever it may be, let's say you're the CTO, it probably is a good idea for you to know the different pieces of code and everything else because you're the one doing it. But even in that situation, you need other skills. But definitely, as you now over 5 people, 25 people, 50 people, 100 people, it is your leadership skills, not even just directly with your own organization, but across the company, being able to really communicate effectively and being able to get people behind you and supporting you, because guess what? That's where employee retention comes from. That's where people want to move to your company, want to be, they want to go someplace where things are happening. You're helping people grow their own careers as well.
Nice. Well, the reason I invited you on the podcast is I wanted to talk a little bit about the state of hiring and the state of jobs, if you will, in tech, in Austin and beyond. So, there was a lot of talk coming into 2023 about this was going to be the year of like the worst recession since 2008. All the news reports had that. I know from talking to companies, trying to get them to join ATC, trying to get them to sponsor events, everybody was pulling back because everybody was predicting by this time, by September, we were going to be in the midst of a really big recession. That hasn't necessarily happened. Although when I look at the numbers, it seems like there have been well over 200,000 layoffs in tech around the country, but we're not really feeling it all that much in Austin. So what's sort of going on in the state of tech when it comes to employees and hiring and layoffs?
Well, it is interesting. I mean, the numbers you're talking about, after hitting almost 100,000 in 22, the number, again, depending on your sources, is 200,000 plus in 23. But, the whole world, you go back 20 years ago and there was a sector called tech and there was the rest of everything else. And now almost anything is tech. There's tech pieces in whatever it is. I don't care, what it is. There's a technology piece to it.
And every company has, deep tech people working for them. I mean, John Deere has a lot of people here in Austin who are their tech arm, but even companies that don't create their own tech necessarily have huge tech departments because, school districts have it. Everybody has it because, you're right. We used to talk about, the high tech sector. Now everything is technology. So that is true, that sort of does touch everything.
Yeah. So technology, there is definitely a huge demand for technology over so many other things. And Austin has always been on such a growth path that, even through the past, whatever you want to call them, economic downturns, no one likes to hear recession or these other words, but in the economic problem situations where, other parts of the country were super suffering with houses being shuttered, Austin was still even growing. And that's, again, because of the growth path that Austin was already on. And perhaps had that not happened, we would have grown even faster. But, technology is definitely, the basis for everything, kind of like you were implying there. And that demand hasn't slowed down.
So what are we seeing in Austin? Are the tech companies that are born and raised here and the ones that have come and opened offices here, are they hiring? Are people growing now?
Well, it's, again, if you want to talk relative to other parts of the country, they are probably doing better. But if you look at kind of the stats we were talking about earlier, in 2023, you had, major companies, like Microsoft laid off 10,000 and Meta laid off 21,000, Amazon 19,000. But guess what? Our darling here in town, Dell, laid off 6,650. So, again, it's not like we were immune to the things happening. There are other companies laying off. And of course, you don't hear as much about the small to medium businesses laying off, but they're doing it as well. And the sad thing for them is, even though those numbers are obviously much, much, much smaller, they may actually be a higher percentage of their, whole employment.
So as we look to what's going on with Austin, are companies, are the startups that are growing, are they hiring sort of senior level people? Are we seeing sort of a continued influx of senior level people into Austin, or have people held off in making some of those hires this year?
I think there's been a push across the country. Again, I think we get a little, again, a little more hiring than other places, but there's been a push across the country to push off or hold off, or hey, let's the three of us, that are C-level or VPs take on kind of that piece of the equation together so that we don't have to hire, for example, a CFO today. We can kind of that, and maybe we do hire a controller, or maybe we go outside and get someone who can do some of the busy work that we don't have time for. But it is trying to put off, worrying about the macroeconomic, problems that are happening throughout the country.
So as we look towards, what do we do if, we're not necessarily in a recession, but people are still holding back on some of these things. What do we look at when we think about, should a company hire during tough times? Do they need to hire during tough times for key employees? What's sort of going on?
Well, interesting thing. Obviously, if your company is, been stressed to the point where, you don't have capital at all, that's one thing. It's called, hey, you can't pay your mortgage. It's kind of hard to hold on to your house kind of thing. But, companies that have some money, this is actually an incredible time to get some key talent into your company, key executives into your company. You take a high-level position, and 2 years ago, you tried to talk to, quote, one of the best in the country for it. You wouldn't have had a chance to even talk to them, much less get them interested, because they had a nice big budget, they had a nice big staff, they had a charter for the next several years. What we call an impact leader. An impact leader is someone who can help take a company to the next level and beyond. Hey, guess what? Those are guys who love challenges. They live for the challenge. And if they're doing that challenge, they're not listening to other people's opportunities because they're doing great. But in this particular time, if their company, they may have even been laid off themselves, but their budget's been stripped, their number of people and their charter, and they're told to kind of sit back and slow down. And now guess what? They're listening for the first time, and they actually hear you, whether they're even thinking about a different job. They actually hear for the first time that guess what? There are other opportunities. And if you actually have something where they can come in and make a difference, boy, you're going to excite them, because that's what they get up every day to do. That's what they want, and they're not getting it today.
So I know that the pandemic changed a couple of things when it came to the world of recruiting these key hires. One was you didn't have to fly everybody in because you couldn't. Nobody could be face-to-face. And a lot of companies actually did full interviews, the full interview process via Zoom. Is that still happening?
There's definitely things that were impossible pre-COVID. Like what we're doing right now. It was almost impossible pre-COVID. It was impossible to have interviews pre-COVID, et cetera. And what it's doing is it is allowing so much of the process to be done. Hey, you can't fly in next week because that VP is gone. The following week, the next VP. Hey, those things can all be done by Zoom. And yes, for some of your key executives, you actually more than likely do want to meet with them personal face-to-face, but it's not the ordeal that it used to be in the past of getting there. And it's actually been very beneficial because you can learn what you need to learn about the person. And when you get down to the final decision, guess what? Them being able to see your operation, again, depending on whether they're running a remote company or versus they're running something where everyone's in the office 5 days a week, obviously makes a difference, but you want to be able to see how they act. And even you want to be able to see how they act on a phone or Zoom call, because that is a new way of communicating today.
So you bring up an interesting thing that I was going to ask, and that is this world of remote, hybrid, or in-person. What are you seeing out there as far as companies? How flexible are companies really being about someone not having to relocate if they're looking for a key hire, or wanting people to still relocate? What's going on in the world of remote versus in-person or hybrid?
Well, there's kind of two pieces of that equation. One's the executive, and one is just the quote talent that's in the office. For the executive, again, it's driven by, hey, if for example they're running a manufacturing line, they kind of need to be there. My wife is an RN in the OR. Guess what? All through COVID,
She was in
She
the
did
OR.
the job on site. It's kind of hard for her to do it via Zoom. I think she would have loved to have done it via Zoom, especially with the disease flying around, a hospital. But again, some things require it more than others. But yes, companies are looking at being more flexible, which kind of ties it back to the quote regular the employees that are under this executive. Hey, is the new world for you 5 days a week in the office, 1 day of the week in the office, et cetera? And I think you could have two identical companies and they wouldn't be able to be running it the same number of days. And I think there's even going to be a pendulum swinging for even maybe the next couple of years of, okay, it's 4 days, it's 2 days, it's 3 days. And guess what? The whole time you're looking at is this word called change. And so many people become petrified when change happens. And yet each time that pendulum swings, there's going to be some people who are going to say, hey, I'm out of here because I can't take the change. So it's going to be interesting over the next couple of years.
So as we look at this idea of the state of hiring in Austin, whether it's for those executive levels or for those people who are the rank and file who are doing the work to make the company happen, is there anything that we haven't touched on that you think is really pivotal that's going on now in Austin or beyond?
Pivotal with respect of what companies need to be doing to hire, or okay,
yes,
yeah. I mean, I think one of the things is there's kind of two things happening right now at the same time. One of the things is, guess what? There is a different world of management because most companies are going to have a hybrid of some type of other. Again, depends on the position, but can you, as a quote leader, do you really know how to lead remotely versus in person? Because it is some different skills. And yes, you can learn some of those skills, but do you have the ability to do that? And then the other shift is the people, like I said, the rank and file of okay, what am I willing to come in the office for? Is it 1 day, 4 day, 3 days? And again, you're looking at how do you make that happen. And what it really gets down to, in my opinion, is a leader that really understands how to communicate with his people, whether they're in person or whether they're over their phone, helps them understand that they are valued, helps them understand how they can add value, and is helping build their career. And guess what? That is how retention happens. And guess what? That's also how you achieve the goals of the company, getting people to perform the things and even beyond what they were supposed to do.
So there hasn't been a lot of talk about this 2023 recession. Everybody seems to have pulled back. I said at the beginning of the year, it was all that I heard. I'm not hearing as much about it. What are you seeing with the companies that you work for? Are people still being cautious, holding back on some of this, or are people thinking, okay, we're just rocking forward as we go into 24?
There is no question that there is a hesitation of hiring, especially in key leadership. There was a quote that I saw from a guy who heads up one of the recruiting staffing associations. His name was Richard Walquist, and he said, companies across the country have been telling us about the slowdown they're seeing in hiring as clients try to wait out the current macroeconomic uncertainty. And I absolutely 100% agree with that. We've had numerous clients who have pushed out. We've had some clients that were ready to hire beginning of January. They were talking to us in December. Let's wait till after Christmas. And there was a little uneasiness up front in January. And just about the time they were really saying, okay, let's move forward, Silicon Valley Bank hit. Silicon Valley Bank threw everybody back into a paralysis mode. And, that kind of getting a little more comfortable. And then the summer happened and all the different things that are happened with the election already, a year plus in advance. People are kind of going, where is this country going to, as well as interest rates? Because interest rates, drive companies as well. If they have leases and properties and things they need to buy, guess what? Those cost money too.
So I love that term, Macroeconomic uncertainty. I think I'm going to work that into my vernacular now. Is that's what we have is a macroeconomic uncertainty.
Right. It's not a recession.
Right.
It's a macroeconomic uncertainty. I really like that one.
Nice. All right, let's shift gears a little bit, right? Let's take a look at Austin and what we think is going on in Austin, not so much in hiring, but in sort of the whole of our tech community. What's going on now and what do you think the future is? You've recently come onto the board of the Austin Technology Council. You've been involved for a long time. So my first question is, why did you want to get involved with ATC at this time?
Well, one of the things I see is not only places like ATC, but so many places, this change in COVID has frozen so many things. There obviously weren't in-person events. There was not the networking there used to be. There weren't opportunities for speaking, et cetera. And now it's a time where, guess what? People need to get back moving again. They need to, be communicating with each other. They need to be talking to each other, meeting each other, understanding how they can help each other. And guess what? That was the whole original goal of what, again, like you said earlier, was the Austin Software Council. But guess what? Austin Software Council was smart enough to realize that, hey, yes, at the time we were more of a, quote, software community, but we're so much bigger than that. Let's change our name. And the same thing is happening right now. There is so much change. There's so much growth in Austin. It's like, okay, how can we reestablish Austin Technology Council's voice and influence across Austin? Because Austin needs an entity that they can depend on and count on to get, hey, what's going on in the world, what's going on with the new technologies, et cetera. Sure, lots of different places are throwing things out, but Austin Technology Council is a company is an organization that's supposed to support all the different companies. It's not trying to say, hey, y'all need to come buy our product. It's like, no, how can we help you?
Right. And we are trying to be that grassroots organization that is the thread that runs through everything. Because there's a time and a place for the fintech groups and for the medtech groups and for everybody to meet within their things. But if we're going to be a technology community, there needs to be that thread that runs through it. And that is what we're trying to do. As we look at post-COVID, though, the culture of business has changed. We talked about the fact that a lot of people are remote or there's more flexibility. I know a young couple who he's supposed to be in the office 4 days a week, but 6-7 weeks a year, they travel and they work remotely. They're very dedicated. They get their work done, but they're doing it from Portugal or Copenhagen or something like that. And so the company is flexible as long as you're getting the work done, and as long as it's not every day all year long, they're cool with it. But some people have that type of schedule. Some people don't have to be in the office till 10. I know when I was looking at planning some of these ATC events, I polled everybody and said, do you want breakfasts, lunches, or dinner time type things? And my God, as many people said, oh, I'm not going to do a breakfast because I can't get up early, as said, oh, I don't want to do end of the day because I'm always going to be home with my kids end of the day. And people who said, oh, lunch isn't good because I'm only in the office 5 hours because I have flexibility on my day. I don't want to leave in the middle of the day. So I chose breakfasts just because it worked. It worked. And we've had, 50 people at all of our breakfasts this year. But people have different schedules, different things where it used to be everybody was in the office by 8 or 9 so they could go to a breakfast. Everybody wanted to get out of the office for an hour or two so they could go to a lunch. And everybody had a commute home. It was nice to go to happy hour so that you didn't have to deal with the traffic. Now all these things are jumbled up, and it makes it harder for the community to have networking events and other things. What are you seeing when it comes to sort of that sense of community?
Yeah, I mean, there's no question that things have been jumbled, and even the fact that Austin has become so large and that traffic problem, it's now, instead of taking 20 minutes to quote drive across town to get to that happy hour, it's taken 45 minutes or an hour.
Or an hour, yeah.
Yeah, easily. Depending on how far out you're going and stuff. And guess what? People pre-COVID, companies, should I say, pre-COVID were bragging that they had 2, 3, 4, 5% of their workforce that worked from home, worked remotely, and they were proud of it and stuff. And of course, the whole world could never go work from home. That's just impossible. Well, guess what? It has changed the boundaries. It's changed the thought process of even people who said, I'll never be able to work from home. They went from home and realized, wow, I save myself, 30 minutes to an hour each direction driving, and I have access to do different things. I can actually pick my kid up at school, and they're seeing things that they never got to do before and enjoying those and saying, hey, I'm rethinking about what I really want out of my career. And people, especially the younger generation, is, hey, I want to balance life. And again, that's what we hear so much of. How do we have that balance in life, which is more than just a job that's working 8 to 5 or even 7 to 7? It's, let's get a balance where we can do more in life than just work.
So you bring up a really interesting point, and that is how big Austin's gotten, right? We've tripled in size in 30 years, and in the last 10 years, we added close to 1 million people into our greater community, and that does change things. So we're never going to be the tight-knit tech community that we were 15 or 20 years ago, because just the geometry of the geography of it doesn't allow for it. Plus the amount of people. Do you think there's still a place and a need for people to network?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, my personal belief is as quote humans, we're made to interact with each other. Yes, there are people who are more introvert versus extrovert, et cetera, et cetera. But even then, people need to be able to communicate with each other, see each other, take people out of this world of 2D and actually kind of go, wow, gee, Tom, I didn't know you were actually three-dimensional. You're a three-dimensional person. And have those conversations where, like I said, whether it's the end of the day at a bar or whatever stuff, you're able to just be able to get down and learn more about the person, because guess what? You're working with people, and when you have personal relationships with them, you now want, well, gee, now I really want to help Tom better because I now know him better.
Well, and the younger people that I counsel, I always tell them, look, your network is your secret weapon, because it's the people who you meet along the way who you grow long-term and mutually beneficial relationships with, who either buy your product or service, they hire you, or they recommend you for opportunities. I mean, that's how I ended up with the job at the Austin Technology Council. Is there were people in my network who were like, hey, you need to go, and talk to this job. I would have never thought about it, except for the fact that like 5 different people came and said, hey, we think you're the one to go do this. So the network, even years later, the network is still referring you and giving you opportunities.
Absolutely.
So as we look to the future, what do you think is the future of Austin's tech community?
Well, as we can, again, hopefully, we're trying to build things to help Austin Technology Council be part of this factor. But as we finally can kind of come back and start networking together and start creating things together and help each other in the community, I see the tech community becoming an integral part. Obviously, Austin has become a tech city, and there are ways as we've gotten out of COVID and starting to meet again where we can actually help each other so much more than what we've been doing in the last couple of years, as everyone, like I said, kind of was frozen in their own homes.
So Wade, I end all these podcasts with a couple of questions. And the first one is, I believe that community, collaboration, and conversations can solve all problems. So I'm a real big believer that we need to be having more of those 3 things. Which of those 3 words resonates with you the most, and why?
Well, it takes all 3 of them to get there. But, if kind of what we were literally just talking about, if you're not having the conversations, you're not able to then start collaborating. Because the bottom line, the end result is you got to collaborate in order to get the end goal met. You got to actually produce. You actually got to do the work. But if we're not talking, we're not having the conversation, we're not solving problems. And that's one of the things that I think Austin's got recognized for, whether it's the startups, et cetera, is we know how to go out and solve problems. Okay, great. Now we got much bigger problems. How do we, not individuals, how do we, as people within Austin or even Austin Technology Council, how do we help solve the problems that are in front of us?
So I'm gonna backtrack a little bit, and then I'll do my last question. But I'm gonna backtrack because you brought something up that I wanted to ask you earlier in this interview. So rather than skipping it, I'm just gonna throw it in at the end. What advice do you have for somebody who is one of those executives, who is the people who like the challenge of growing a company and taking it to the next level? What advice do you have for them to make sure they get found when an executive search is taking place?
That's a great question. I actually get asked that quite a bit. Yeah, I mean, to me, it gets back to what we were just talking about. It is network. How did you get the job you was talking about? It's your network. If you're, stuck, whether it's at home or whether you're stuck in your office not communicating, guess what? No one's going to be throwing your name out there. And, they probably have some questions. Well, gee, does Sam or Susie, whoever it is, have the right skills? Because our new world is more about how can we communicate with, again, Zoom, in person, et cetera, et cetera. And that's an integral part of the equation.
So being involved in your community helps.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Nice. Well, that's why we're inviting everybody to be part of the Austin Technology Council. So last question for you. If someone was coming to visit Austin who'd never been here before, where's the one place you would take them? Whether it was an attraction or a restaurant, where's the go-to place that you take all out-of-towners?
Well, if they're from out of state, of course, I guess this applies to people in state as well, but if they're from out of state, you probably want to take them to get some Mexican food, because that's obviously one of the things that we're famous for, as well as barbecue and other things.
So where are you taking them?
Well, there's Matt's or Chewy's or whatever. There's several great places and stuff, depending on what part of town in the end. The other place, though, is back when we used to have this thing called a lake. We could take them out to the lake, but someone pulled the plug and the drain's been leaving on that thing, so that's kind of harder to do. Matter of fact, I'm a little more worried about getting on the lake because I don't want to hit an island.
Right? Yeah, absolutely. Would be nice to go out on the lake, but that's a little harder these days. Well, Wade Allen, thank you so much for being a guest on Austin Tech Connect.
Super. I very much appreciate your time, and again, very much appreciate the things you're doing to help take Austin to the next level and beyond.
Well, thank you. And thanks to everybody who tunes in and listens. You know what? Is your company a member of the Austin Technology Council? We would welcome your involvement because we want to add your voice to our tech community as we look to the future. Make sure that you're a member of the Austin Technology Council.
Thanks for listening to the Austin Tech Connect podcast. Make sure your company is a member of the Austin Technology Council and add your voice to the future of our tech ecosystem in Central Texas.